We're live. Corey, what's going on, man?
Just living the M&A dream. When I tell people, Steve, just don't know whose dream it is.
The M&A dream. So, for those of you that are just joining, Corey and I are going to sit here and talk as if we have not already been sitting here and talking for the last 15 minutes while you guys join. So today we're going to talk. Today we're going to talk about something that I've always considered like a tough conversation. And the reason for that is because it requires you to I don't know, I feel like it requires you to take a break and just think, because when it comes to, valuation and mergers and acquisitions and all these big fancy important sounding words, you're probably going to fall in one of two or three camps, and I'm sure there's more, but to generalize, you're either, I have no idea how any of that works. I'm too small. I'll never get there. I'm just going to work till I die. You might be I'd love to sell my company one day, but today's not that day, and I've got too many fires to put out for my clients. Or maybe you're like totally on board. I'm looking to sell. I'm looking to buy. I'm fully bought in, and I want to absorb everything I possibly can when it comes to M&A, so that way I can make better decisions, both for my company as we scale, and as well so that way I can think about different things during due diligence if I go to acquire somebody. What would you say to that, Corey? Or am I forgetting anybody?
No, I think, even to generalize a little bit, Steve, right? People oftentimes, I'm too busy, or, hey, I got to run a business. I don't have time to think about valuation or M&A. I don't have any interest. I don't have any desires over the next couple of years. But what's really key reminder there, which I think what you're trying to say, Steve, is how do they translate the operations of the business? What are the things and decisions that you're making today that could potentially impact and will impact your valuation? Because the one thing that we need to remind everybody is that you will go through a transaction at some point, whether you think you will or won't, right? Because unfortunately, there is one thing that is true to all of us, where we won't all be here forever, right? And so whether that's a transition to a family member, a transition to an executive or a manager that's in the business today, or a third party, right? There will be a transition and a transaction that occurs with you and your business at some point, right? So,
but if I'm not around for the transition, do I have to care about how smooth the transition goes?
well, no, not necessarily, right? But depends on what legacy you want to leave right behind. I'm like, gosh, Steve, man, really left me a mess, or Steve really had his ducks in his row, and I really appreciate the time that he took to plan and execute on that strategy. So, I mean, it's a great question, but it just depends on that legacy you want to leave.
Can you imagine just not caring, never setting your business up for smooth transition, and then you just up and die? You don't have a will, so there's not even like a plan in place, and now your wife has to figure out how to take over this business that she knows nothing about, which means now she's looking to sell the business as quickly as possible. And the business, it might be profitable. It might be running like a well-oiled machine, but now she knows nothing. And I'm sure somebody's going to get that company for a pretty good discount because she doesn't have everything set up. Am I looking at this correctly?
Yeah, it's kind of a morbid picture, but it happens a lot. We actually get involved in those quite often. Whether that's a significant event such as a death happens, it happens a lot, right?
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, and not the sole reason we're on the conversation today, but it does happen a lot. And I even had one this week where that's the case, where a spouse has had to take over the business and just looking for some advice. And as you'd expect, some significant others are involved in business, but a lot of them aren't, right? You've got an entrepreneur that starts the business that focuses on that. And typically the other is the supporting cast, right? Taking care of other things outside the business. And, we all probably have our own lanes, as we call it in my marriage, right? Some are involved and some aren't. And it's just really unfortunate. And to your point is there's only so much you can do in a short amount of time to get that business in preparation for a sale or a transition. And some work out and some of them really don't, unfortunately.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is before we like dive fully in. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you guys, we're going to try and get through 10, what are we calling it? Like 10 things that you should be
Factors. Yeah.
considering fixing, factors that can impact your company's valuation. And we're even going to talk about, like, let's be honest, it's surface level. We're only going to have like 30 to 40 minutes for content, right? So you're not going to fix everything today, but we're going to give you some ideas and you're going to be able to like take what we talk about today. You can go on your own. This isn't a sales pitch, okay? Like, yes, we would love for you to buy our stuff, but you don't have to buy anything to take what you learned today and be able to apply it to your business. Before we dive into that stuff, I'm going to let you guys learn a little bit more about Corey and me. And I'm going to launch a poll. It's got 2 questions. I'd love to learn more about you guys. I'm sure I could come up with some evil, nefarious reason for doing so. But honestly, it's just going to help us understand where we could spend more time in this conversation. Okay, guys? So I'm going to launch that. I'll start. So that story I talked about earlier. Hi, I'm Steve. I was an MSP. Okay. I started it in 2009 and, I'm going to go into a story without a lot of context because I don't want it to take a lot of time. I was like estranged from my uncle for 20 years, if not more. And he and I started talking again and I started helping him with his business. He was an SAP 1, I don't know, like gold or whatever partner. Like they had like 15 employees. They were doing real well for themselves. It was him and another business partner. His business partner died. A will. So now my uncle and the business partner's wife are managing this company. And obviously my uncle is basically being like managing partner. The wife is, I don't know, collecting checks and diving into piles of money like Scrooge McDuck. I have no idea how that works, right? So then 6 weeks later, my uncle dies. Suddenly, just has like a heart attack in a hotel room and no will. So both of these guys who owned 50-50 shares of a company, neither of them had any type of I don't know what's the right word, some type of plan, right? They had no planning done for worst case scenarios. So now both wives are seriously trying to like navigate this situation. And I was of no help other than just helping to keep things running day to day. Like I have no M&A experience, so I couldn't offer anything. They worked with a company. They sold it to a much larger firm, absorbed the business. It probably took 18 months from my uncle passing to due diligence and acquisition and integration, at least 18 months. So that means that was 18 months where these spouses were just relying on like whatever kind of paychecks the husbands would have been getting. And you got to think these husbands were also like operators in the business. Like they were also going out. Like my uncle was going to like China and all these different countries, like working with clients. He did a ton with manufacturing. So now they've got 2 fewer really smart guys going out and doing stuff, but they're still like paying the spouses. So it was a disaster. I don't recommend it. And I bet you have an easy way to fix that. And is it as simple as get a will? Like that's not going to just fix the problem. I think there's more like contingency planning that's required for that. But
There's a lot that goes in that one, Steve. I mean, I think you got to factor in both the business and the personal side there, right? Because the personal side that's a whole nother topic as it relates to trust and will and estate planning, right? But that is a factor that really goes into the business side. But I think it comes on from a business perspective there, just ensuring you've got the appropriate succession planning. And that could be either people, processes, or technology, and all the above, right? So I think it's all the above. And it's an unfortunate situation that, you went through and others went through, but it happens a lot. It really does. And so it's not, there's some things that we're going to talk about in here that are direct correlation to that, and some of them that aren't, but it happens quite a bit.
All right. Corey, why don't you, cheer us all up a little bit. Tell us a little bit about you, man.
A little morbid there, but yeah, no, appreciate you having me on today, Steve. It's always a pleasure to join Alternative Payments and you get to know you a little bit better. Learn about your hobbies that we were talking about backstage, right? Which is awesome, which is pretty easy to tell behind the scenes for you what your hobbies are. But yeah, Corey Kerns,
Knitting.
Vice President of M&A here at iTValuations. We're a boutique M&A shop, specialized in the MSP sector. We also do some tax advisory services as well. I've actually been in the channel for my entire career. I was an MSP operator myself, so ran and sold a business as well, and then have been involved with financing equipment and software to MSPs over the last 10 years, and then here recently in the M&A front over the last couple of years. So it's not something I would have said coming out of school and in my upbringing of like, hey, I want to be in the MSP channel for my entire career, but I wouldn't have it any other way at this point. So.
And isn't it fascinating how our careers can shift? And I'll just be quick on this, but I started doing internal IT at a school, and then I went into like computer equipment sales, and then I fell into an IT consulting role, and then I started my MSP, and now I'm in marketing. So, you never know where you're going to end up. And if you don't sit down and go, man, where do I see myself in 5, 10, 20 years? Who knows? You guys might end up in marketing too. So you better be careful. So real quick, I do have a poll running. We hope you got to know us a little bit better. We'd love to get you to know you a little bit better. The poll has 2 questions. The first one, have you thought about your exit strategy yet? So far of the people who have answered, I don't know if you can see the poll, Corey.
I'm sure I can figure it out, but I'm on.
So the responses are along the lines of,
there we go.
No, I love what I do and plan to keep working indefinitely. Nobody has said that one. Nobody, I don't know why. I've got a rough idea on my exit strategy. I'd like to grow to a certain revenue target before selling. We've got some people who say, I have a clear plan. I know the valuation I want, and I'm working toward it. I feel like that's the best approach, because now, like the last guy was saying, I'm going to grow to a certain revenue target, but that doesn't mean that's what you're going to sell it for, because revenue does not equal profitability and everything. But the next guy says, I know the valuation I want and I'm working toward it. So, and then finally, I haven't really thought about it yet, but I know I'll need a plan eventually. So other than, no, I love what I do and I plan to keep working indefinitely. Nobody wants to work until they die here. That's a good thing. Somebody has answered yes to the rest of them. Now, what's the biggest challenge your MSP faces in achieving your exit goals? So the most answered one is reducing owner dependency so the business can run without me. And then the next is investing more in sales and marketing to drive growth. Next is managing cash flow and contracts to make the business more attractive to buyers. And nobody said improving our financial statements and accounting practices.
That's boring. That's boring is why.
It is. Yeah, it is boring. But we're gonna. I don't want to skip ahead, but that's that right. One we're going to talk about that one. Okay. Yep. So full disclosure though, Corey, I see 1, 2, there was a third. I see 2 people, and it's okay, you guys can stay. I see 2 people who are like vendors who do like accounting, CFO stuff.
I see one of them for sure.
So that might be like, obviously they don't need to improve their financial statements. They're already a whiz at that. But everyone else just thinks that's boring, and I totally understand. All right, so let's talk about the first thing, which is revenue retention and growth. Let's just dive in. Revenue retention. I would say a simple definition is you don't lose customers. It's almost known as churn.
Yeah. Don't lose customers. What's your overall net retention, right? Year over year is the way we look at it, right? That's going to include the churn of lost customers. It's going to include the addition of new customers or the lack thereof. Unfortunately, I would say the market right now. And then obviously you got some downsells, upsells, you think about those QBRs, that you're hopefully improving and upselling your customers throughout the year. And we won't get into it, but a lot of that, people talk about, right? Investment, sales and marketing, right? It's sales and marketing, but it's also intertwined service delivery, right? It's customer satisfaction. It's how well are you retaining those customers, which typically speaking, Stephen, you know this, and I think everybody knows this, the MSPs are really good at retention, right? They don't typically lose customers unless that customer has a unforeseen financial situation or that any customer goes through M&A, which is a pretty common one right now. We're seeing a lot of churn as a result of M&A at the end user level. And the spot that I would say historically in our valuation data would suggest this as well this year is new logo has been challenging, right? It's been challenging over the last 12 months. And we're seeing that come through in our valuation work that just typically speaking, on average, I think MSPs average like 1 per quarter, maybe a little bit better. Some of the better ones obviously are better than that, but it's not that many new logos per year per MSP right now.
Is that, and I'm going to poke the bear a little. I'm not looking for a fight.
Why not?
Because of like political climate?
Oh, yeah. No, I think that's a good no. I mean, I typically would say, Steve, you're not poking the bear. I actually think it's factual. So typically speaking, election years do impact buying decisions, right? Think about that even on a personal level, right? So even on a personal level, prior to election or prior to elections, typically people are waiting to see, right? Because that could have tax impact, it could have tariff impacts, right? If you think about some of the changes that played out pre and post November last year, there's significant impacts both at a personal level and at a commercial level. So that definitely plays into it, Steve, for sure. And I do think from a geo perspective, right, depending on the political landscape of that, so like West Coast versus East Coast versus the Midwest, there is differences there from a sales growth, right? Some of that is politically driven, some of it's unrelated, right? It's just economy driven, right? Which again, we're not here to debate that. Those are fairly intertwined in terms of when you think about the political landscape and economic growth. They typically go hand in hand there.
So when we think economics from a politically neutral standpoint, are there indicators that we could be looking at? Like, for example, I think, didn't the Fed drop rates again? So like, are things like that indicators that things might pick up?
I think there's a couple factors there. Yeah, Steve, I think the interest rates, the capital markets are a pretty good indicator. I think the job growth is a pretty good indicator there, right? And that's obviously a report that comes out. I think those obviously are pretty good indicators. Unemployment, obviously, right? Inflationary numbers, they're all typically included in similar reports there as we think about economic growth.
Yeah. And what would you say, like, obviously, when it comes to growth, I think it's safe to say that an MSP should have like a sales and marketing plan.
Mm-hmm.
probably should have a sales and marketing budget too. Is there like an industry standard, like this is what you should be spending towards marketing and or sales?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's going to vary by the specific company, right? Size,
Sure.
sector, but we typically, maybe stated differently, one of the things that we look at in terms of valuations and in M&A transactions is what percentage of revenue is the business reinvesting in the sales and marketing engine, right? So we would say typically in that 5 to 10% would be what we would suggest. Now recognize some years are better than others, and maybe you want to put more fuel on the fire, and other years are a little bit more challenging and you need to pull back a little bit. But the key indicator for us is, to your point, Steve, do you have a plan and how well are you executing on it? But more importantly, are you investing in the future of the business, right? Because referrals, just to be very blunt, referrals are only going to get you so long. Typically, MSPs are getting new customers from referrals, and that's great. But then how are you extracting those out and getting them? And at some point, unless we had new customers, there can only refer so much in business, right? So we typically just tell people, right, that you got to continue, regardless if you're not seeing the short-term results. What is the investment back into the business from a sales and marketing perspective?
And I have found that when it comes to marketing, I'm not going to speak to sales because I do not consider myself like a sales guru. Okay.
Well, the piece I got to tell everybody though, Steve, sales.
Every business owner is a salesperson. I get
Well, actually, even in the MSP market, I would tell you, everybody complains, you get in front of the sales team and they need more money, but not everything's about sales, but everybody's in sales regardless.
sure.
That's what I like to remind people is sometimes whether you're the business owner or you're the technician, everybody's in sales in some capacity. You just title might not reflect it.
You're right. I like to say I'm not in sales because it reduces my anxiety.
Sure, Somebody get you more.
So the one thing that I've found, if you take anything away from this, even if you do marketing on a shoestring budget, decide what you're going to do.
Right.
So whether that means I'm gonna make a 60-second video every weekday and post it on LinkedIn at 8 a.m. If you're gonna do that, great. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have all the fancy lights and the drums and everything like I do. You can do it on a shaky iPhone, okay? But you have to be consistent. If you say you're going to do something, you have to do it. Consistency, I would say, is far more important than anything else because that is what's going to show people what working with you is like. And if you are consistently inconsistent, that is also a reflection on
Right.
you.
Right. And part of that too, Steve, is to expand on what you said there is if you're not consistent or don't give enough time, how are you going to ever evaluate if that marketing effort was worth the return on investment? Right. So it's like, how do you know? And so I think right now, what I would tell you, Steve, is like probably the biggest factor as we think about transactions that I'm working or have been involved in is that revenue growth historically, and what's the future optimistic look like from a buyer or seller as it relates to that revenue retention and growth. It's just really critical. Obviously, stating the obvious there, but it's super critical.
Yeah. If anyone here has any sales or marketing tips, toss them in the chat. I'd love to turn this into, let's call it crowdsourcing. Let's see what else you guys want to say when it comes to growth. And then when it comes to revenue retention, I would say one of the easiest things you can do is ask your customers if they're happy.
Right.
Run a CSAT, customer satisfaction, run an NPS, Net Promoter Score. Now, how you do that can vary. A lot of times I've seen people do a CSAT like on every ticket. And that's okay. If that's the path you want to take, go for it. And an NPS I've seen people do every quarter, twice a year. But basically what CSAT is doing is, hey, how happy are you with this interaction that we're doing right now? And then Net Promoter Score, that is, how happy are you overall working with my company? And would you tell a friend?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the important piece of NPS is you want to know that they're happy working with you. And if they're not, you want to find out why so you can fix it. That's the other important piece. But if they're like head over heels in love working with you, they're not going anywhere, find a way to capitalize on that. Whether that means getting them to do like a Google business review or asking them to make a personal introduction to a colleague of theirs or another local vendor of theirs
Right.
or something, right? What ideas do you have for that, Corey?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Is typically my approach is, okay, if you're, based on hopefully an in-person meeting, right, whether that's a QBR or annual business review, if they've been satisfied with the services, which, typically they are, otherwise they should have let you know, is, who else would do you think in your network would benefit from the services that we provide, right? Is a phrase that I usually use a lot, is just, instead of saying like, who can you refer my business to, but like, who else could benefit from the services, right? It's just a different way to position it so it doesn't feel so desperate, to be honest with you. It's so yeah, I think, and somebody else even dropped in the chat, SEO is a good one. I think making sure you're present, both obviously in your physical geo that you're in, but also from an online presence. Because I just think today the buying decision and process is different than it was 15 years ago, even 5 years ago, right? The amount of information that people are getting, I think the stat they say, and don't anchor on this, is that typically a buyer has done 80% of their research before they even speak with you. And so you just have to cover the last 10 to 20%.
That's exactly it. And I like that Devin also said, so focus on local SEO. Not only will it help you find quality leads, but it'll help you convert your referrals at a higher rate too.
Right.
Because if your SEO is on point, and if, like I said earlier, you're using the NPS as an opportunity to promote like Google business reviews, now when somebody's looking up your company and doing research, my company, Taylor IT Group, I want to say like 48 5-star reviews. I had a 5.0 perfect score. I did pretty dang good, but that's because I pushed so hard on getting people to do those reviews.
And Steve, maybe just real quick, I mean, not to assume, but do you want to just give a quick overview SEO? Because some people may not know.
Sure.
You know that acronym, right? I think it's a common practice today, but just so the group knows.
SEO is search engine optimization. Now, I thought about coming up with a fake one, but in the interest of time, in the interest of time, it's search engine optimization, and basically that's how you tell Google and ChatGPT and all the other search engines out there who you are, where you are, what you do, so that when somebody types in, somebody fix my printer in Akron, Ohio, hopefully I don't come up because printers are my kryptonite. But that, yeah, so that's what SEO is. And there's all kinds of SEO. And if you're looking for someone to help you with SEO, I know some great people I can refer you to. And you can drop something in the chat if that's something you want help with.
Yeah.
Now, next thing I want to talk about is owner dependent.
Well, clearly pretty relevant based on the poll, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we probably don't need to spend too much time here.
None whatsoever, right?
So there are a lot of things that the owner could be dependent on. It could be sales and marketing, especially if you're a smaller MSP. You just don't have the budget to hire specific people for that stuff. What other kinds of things might people rely on an owner for?
I mean, owner-led sales, owner-led finance, owner-led technical, sometimes all the above, right? It could be all the above, right? The cool part is, which I saw is like four people even said on the poll, Steve, is like, I know I can increase my valuation if I reduce the dependencies of myself as a business owner. Well, great. You know what? Of all the things that we're going to talk about, that's probably the one you can control most, right? Because there's no outside factors, right? There is outside factors, but not as much as the other things that we're going to talk about. So we always call it the vacation test. So when's the last time as a business owner you've taken a vacation? It's the first question. When's the last time you went? Second question is, when's the last time you've been on a vacation and didn't work? Right? Is the second question. And the third question is, when's the last time you've been on a vacation and nobody knew about it? Nobody even noticed you were gone. That's a progression that we typically tell people as a business owner, you need to work through, because the ultimate goal as a business owner to be comfortable and to know the business is ready for a transaction is if you can take vacation and you're like, oh shoot, I didn't even know you were gone, Steve. Well, great. That's perfect. I've done my succession planning, both from a people process, everything as it relates to the business.
I didn't even think of the nobody noticed you're gone part. So I've got a buddy, he runs an MSP in the 51st state of Canada. And I got jokes, guys. Please don't take offense. So he runs an MSP up in Canada, and he said, he's like in his 40s. He's a young guy. He's in reasonably good shape, but he also understands he could just get hit by a bus someday.
Right.
So he is now doing all sorts of stuff. And some of the things that come to mind off the top of my head, and I don't know details, and maybe Corey can elaborate on some of these topics. He has a bunch of SOPs, so that way he can, like everything's documented. It's not in his head anymore. So if somebody needs to log into Kaseya and pay the bill and only what's owed and not all the extra money, they know how to log in and do that. He's got everything documented with I think he's using privacy.com for those, temporary debit cards. He's got the taxes all documented, payroll, I wanted to say acquisition, but purchasing. Sure. I can't think of the right term for that.
Procurement.
You know what I'm saying? Procurement. Yeah. So he's got all sorts of things that he's documented, and he's even starting to document things like escalations and that kind of stuff. And he's got a team, but I think it's only like 6 of them. Yeah. So he's also thinking about what does my org chart look like down the road, not just today, but who do I need in 2 years?
Right.
I'm sorry, Janelle. I really was just trying to be funny. So anyway, the point of all that is now he has a business. I wouldn't call them partner. They're like a buddy, a different MSP business owner nearby. They're friendly. Okay. So he's got some type of break glass agreement where, if he gets hit by a bus, he's hospitalized for an extended period of time. There is documentation that basically his wife can give that guy access to, and that guy can basically temporarily run the company as interim CEO. Right. He's also got it to where if it's a smaller thing, he just wants to go out of town for a few days, then he's got things documented well enough to where maybe an office manager or, somebody can just run things and keep things running smoothly. So that's kind of what he's put in place. I'm sure that, that's one of those your mileage may vary kind of things. And it's scary thinking about you got to think about it that guy's technically your competitor, and you're like, here's the keys to the kingdom. Thanks.
But it's better than nothing, right?
Yes.
Than nothing. I think it's a progression. It's maturity, right? The first step, right, is acknowledging that there is dependencies, right? The second step there is okay, I need to document that, right? To your friend's story there. But the most critical thing that we typically see is while things are documented, owners are particular, right? It is their livelihood. So they'll jump in when there's fire drills, right? They'll continue to jump in and do the things that they need to do from an operations perspective. But the critical part there is allowing the team, right? You set expectations and you allow them the freedom and the autonomy to do what you've asked them to do. Otherwise, they'll never develop the muscle memory to take the dependencies off your plate as an owner, right? So it's the actual physical switch in your mind to okay, I know I can do it better because I've done this 150,000 times. I'm going to let them do it, and I'm not going to worry about it because I know they'll get it done, right? That's a hard shift. I get it as somebody where your livelihood depends on the success of the business, but it's something that you just need to do, right? Even if you plan to, transition the business to your son or daughter or whomever in the family someday, you're still going to have to transition and get comfortable with people doing work that you've normally done. So it's a hard one, but it's one that you can control the most as a business owner.
Now, in the chat, whether you are the business owner or not, I'm genuinely curious. Do you have, I'll call it like a second in command? Do you have a first mate? Is there somebody that can do your role, your responsibilities in the event of your absence, regardless of how long that absence is? Let us know. Again, I'm not trying to do anything nefarious, just making conversation. I want to make it a little more interactive with everyone. And if you do not have that, if you do not have that second in command, why not? And I'm not looking for like soul searching here. Did you just not think of it? Did you have one and they quit? Was it not a good fit and you let them go? Like there could be so many reasons, right? But I'm also curious, like if you don't have one, is there a good reason why? And it could just be like, I never realized I needed that. Like I never thought about it. It's tough, even me, like I'm not the CEO of alternative payments, but I'm already looking at, how do I get a second in command? Because I want to go on vacation.
Well, I think Steve, the point there too that I would make is that one of the best characteristics you can as a leader is hiring and developing people that eventually replace you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's a shift in mindset, a little bit of like the hero mentality that I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs have, right? It's the firefighting versus how do I develop people that are better than me that I report to someday, right? Like that's a true servant leader mentality is the way I look at that.
And one way that I would look at it is, okay, so I'm in marketing, right? I was an IT guy for over 20 years and now I'm somehow in marketing. I joke, I'm not bad at it, but I don't have formal training in marketing, right? So, I have done certain tasks and now marketing has a bigger budget. So that way, we can start to ramp up what we're doing. Well, rather than me keeping all these tasks, I'm able to say, okay, what if we hired somebody that was able to like offload some of these things from me? Because I'm trying to do this much stuff with this much time, which means I'm only doing it okay at best. But if I was able to narrow the scope of my responsibilities, now I'm able to do those few things really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
So the more tasks you can get off your plate or your CEO's plate, the better it's going to be, honestly, for everyone. And as a company scales, you're going to find that people really start to specialize in like really narrowly focused tasks for the company. Julie said that she just left for 2 weeks and it was great. To some extent, you have to leave to see what breaks. Otherwise, it's hard to plan and expect everything. Plus, people will surprise you. Isn't that the darndest thing about people? Is there anything else you would like to add to the owner dependency portion?
No, I mean, I think we hit a lot of the high points, Steve, and I think it's, like I said, it's a tough one. Don't get me wrong, but it's super critical. But again, I think it's the easiest one to prioritize and take immediate action, regardless of where you're at in that journey. As you think about, valuation creation and M&A, your transactions.
Now, the third item on our list is
kind of hit a little bit.
Sales and marketing investment. And we've already basically touched on that.
Yeah.
I'm okay to just move on to the next one unless there's something else you think we need to do.
No, I think that's fine, Steve. In the interest of time.
And then, so number 4 is, I would say my internal kryptonite. So my external kryptonite is printers. So if somebody says, Steve, my printer doesn't work, I'll say, let's buy you a new one. Uh, Internally, if somebody says, hey, Steve, what's our EBITDA and our DSO and our cash flow? And I'll say, call Julie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so talk to me. Why is accounting and financial statements a big deal? Like, really, it's just some paper and QuickBooks. Who cares?
Just paper, what I always tell people is it is boring, but the financial statements have to align to the narrative of the business, right? If you're telling somebody, hey, you're doing really well and you're executing and you think your business is worth X, well, do the financial statement go and actually support that, right? So what we say, right, is it's fact finding, right? It's putting the facts and data aligned with what you just described. And so what we typically see is, for the most part, everybody has pretty clean financial statements, but given MSPs aren't really regulated, they're not what they would say is GAAP aligned, right? So generally accepted accounting principles, which is basically is accounting practices to align the financial statements.
I have heard that phrase before.
Yeah.
I bet Julie has said it to me before.
Yeah.
But every time I hear GAAP, I think about if I get in an accident and I've got a gap coverage on my car.
Yeah, I actually don't like it, Steve, because it ensues gap in the financial statements, which that's not what it's saying, right? It's an acronym, but what we see is, they don't have to, right? So a lot of them aren't gapped, and that's okay, right? But there are certain things is a lot of times a buyer is going to want to make sure to be able to run simple analysis, right? A really simple one is like, what's your gross margin by the services that you offer? If you can't extract that from the data, it's really challenging for a buyer to engage when you're saying like, I'm doing really well, my service delivery is awesome, my efficiencies are great, but if the financials don't support that, you can obviously overcome that. It just takes some time, and it's an obstacle that we have to overcome a lot of times in M&A transactions, and unfortunately, it is sometimes the number one deal killer is when financial statements are a little messy or sloppy, or they don't align with historical conversations or statements that are being made. You can't justify, going through a transaction if they can't get to the data.
That makes sense. So I guess what I'm hearing is there's probably some best practices.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, your personal finances are not the same as your business finances, and they should always be separate. And if they're not separate, there should be like clear delineation in the accounting of, oh yeah, this was a purchase made for Steve personally. So it's, I don't know the right way to classify it, owner's draw or whatever, right? So there's a way to classify that in QuickBooks so that way they at least understand, oh yeah, I was spending money for myself instead of for the business.
Yeah.
But you probably just shouldn't do that.
It's a common practice, unfortunately, right? For small to medium-sized businesses, like what I tell people, right, is your tax strategy, right, to minimize your tax impact to the IRS, and your value creation strategy are not. They actually are in the inverse. They typically
are, yeah,
because right, you're not because everybody has the right to make sure that they're running their business, and from a personal side, right. Those typically don't align, and that's okay. We work through that all the time when we think about personal expenses run through the business. But the biggest thing to remember in this conversation is that if you're going to go through a transaction, you want your financial statements to instill or increase the confidence to the buyer as you've already done, right? So if you're showing them great cultural things, great sales and marketing things, but then your financial statements don't reflect that, it just causes them to not have as much confidence as you in the business, is what we tell people.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I want to clarify, I do see that there are a few questions in the Q&A.
Yeah.
I have not forgotten you. I'm not ignoring you guys. We're going to do a little AMA at the end where I'll address those. So if you guys stick around for like 10 more minutes, we'll be able to start answering those questions. Okay. And one thing I want to throw out there is, I believe there's the book Profit First. Am I thinking of the right book? Where I think it was like the first 5 pages just made me mad and throw the book across the room, where it was basically, I'm paraphrasing, if you're doing everything you can to like write everything off, so that way you don't pay taxes, then that means your business isn't making money. Paying taxes is like a reflection that your business was profitable. So even silly things like, if you're an LLC operating as a sole proprietor, okay, so that means you just do everything on your, was it 1040, and then you do the Schedule C and all that, right? So, look at me using tax words. Um, if you do your best to like write everything off, and maybe your business had $150,000 in revenue, and it looked like it could have been 120,000 in profit, but then you decided to write a bunch of stuff off and now you've got 35,000 in profit, like good luck buying a house, because like they're going to look at your tax statements. You're probably not giving yourself a paycheck if you're operating as a sole prop. You're probably just like drawing money out of the bank account, and that's that, unless you set up payroll, right? So there's obviously implications across the board, not just for selling the company, but even just for living a life, making sure that you're operating your business well when it comes to accounting and finances and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, it's probably a whole nother topic. See, we could get into. We won't have enough time, but the other thing I just leave a note here for the group is you're obviously leveraging CPAs, right, to do your taxes. But I would just make sure you're spending adequate time with them or finding somebody from a tax strategy perspective. And sometimes they're not the same person, and that's okay. But typically we find that small to medium sized businesses, especially in the MSP market, are underserved from just a tax strategy, right? Because there's definitely some things that you should factor in depending on what your timeline, what your desires are as it relates to the future of the business, and just making sure you've got a plan. Like we talked about, sales and marketing plan, but there's also a tax plan as well that you should be thinking about, right? And it may be 5-10 years out, and that's okay. But you're better off to start thinking about that, planning for it, than, I'm ready to sell my business, I'm 6 months out. Well, that's a little too late to be thinking about tax strategies as it relates to that.
Yeah. Now, along with accounting and financial statements, the fifth thing to think about is cash flow management.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I could talk a lot about cash flow management, being with alternative payments. Why don't you start, Corey?
I'm gonna allow you some time there, especially as an organization that leverages alternative payments ourselves, right? So we do see the value or the solution that you guys bring, but what it comes down to, right, is cash discipline, right? Is going to be a factor in evaluation. And unfortunately, we do see a lot of sellers leaving cash on the table because they're not managing their cash appropriately, right? And unfortunately, not leveraging, right? When you think about, DSO or your accounts receivables and accounts payables, it's a lot of times they've got inverse practices is what we would say, is like they're paying their payables way faster than they should be, and they're taking a long time to collect on their receivables. Like that's not a good combination for many reasons, which we won't be able to get into a ton, but it will leave cash on the table. It will increase the risk of the transaction, and ultimately it could lower your perceived multiple, right, in a transaction. So I just rambled a lot there, but there's a lot that goes into this one, Steve.
Absolutely. So some things I'll throw out there. We talked earlier, just a moment ago, about clean accounting, right? That tells you what happened. That helps you understand the past. Cash flow management helps you see what's coming up next. So that's cash flow management can help you see the future. I wish I could see the future, like in real life, but cash flow management is an excellent runner-up in that. Small improvements to cash flow matter. So there's a thing called DSO, days sales outstanding, and cutting DSO by just 10 days, depending on what your outstanding balance is with all the invoices owed to you by customers. I mean, cutting DSO by 10 days could add tens of thousands in available cash to your business at any given time.
Yeah.
And like anytime you add tens of thousands in cash, now you're like, all right, now I can start making some more strategic plays here. Do I want to pay this entire agreement for 12 months now and get a discount? Do I want to make an acquisition? Do I want to buy new software? Do I want to hire somebody? Do I want to outsource something? So like you can start to make some really great decisions when not only is your cash in your hand instead of in your customer's bank, but it's also predictable. And predictable is the really tough part. It's not just about collecting faster, right? Because if it was collecting faster, like we get the guy from Jimmy John's to go do your collections, right? What do they say? Jimmy John's is freaky fast, right? But it's about predictability and visibility. You can't scale or sell a business that you can't forecast.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, Steve. I think we were even talking, last week when we were talking about the topics there, but another small one, but does add up a lot is fees, right? That as you think about from a cash collection or even from a payment processing perspective, fees, and that can add up, right? If you think about 3% or 4% on things. So it's a way in which you could save some money to invest in some of the things that we've already talked about, right? Sales and marketing or others. But the other thing, just as a reminder to the group, is you're able to reduce those fees, whatever percent you were able to reduce them, it's a straight impact to the bottom line, right? So it is going to go, you're saving 3% on the collections or on the fees from a payment processor. It's straight income, right? It is straight income from that perspective.
Yeah. So with that, increasing the share of customers that are on auto pay. So if they're automatically paying your invoice for you, whether it's with a credit card or through ACH, which I always recommend, that's going to raise your company's value. It's gonna increase the appeal of acquisition. And during due diligence, data accuracy is critical, right? So by consolidating payments and payouts, maybe if you do it with a single platform that auto reconciles with accounting software, you can improve financial accuracy. You can strengthen the likelihood of a successful acquisition, which leads me to just a quick, if anybody here is interested in streamlining their cash flow, alternative payments, what we do is we offer basically payment processing and a payment portal for MSPs. So your clients can sign into a portal and they can pay your bills. They can set up auto pay. They can view their historical invoices, all that good stuff. And it's really customizable. We'd love to show you a demo. There's like no obligation. So if that's something that you would be interested in, open for a discussion, I'm just going to launch a poll. And you let us know if that's something you'd like to discuss. Now, we only have like 6 minutes left. So what we're going to do, we are going to rapid fire contracts. Corey, number 6 is contracts.
Real quick, I think length of contract, we want to be able to go into it. Some people are, hey, I'm a 3-year rate. Some people are like, hey, a month because I want to prove my value. That's a topic we can debate. Just recognize contract length and language included in contracts both directly influence valuations and transactions, right? That could be deal structure. That could be the overall valuation. The type of sale is really important there as you think about contract length because it has to be enforceable and has the ability to transfer to a buyer. So it's one that we often forget about, but it's super critical in the grand scheme of things.
Margin drivers, price and efficiency.
Margin is king, right? I mean, cash is king and margin is right up there with, and what I always tell people, right, is it's pretty simple, but it's hard to change is there's 2 levers, right? Overall pricing of your services to your customers and how efficient you are at delivering those services, which typically the biggest cost there is labor, right? So what I always tell people is let's look at your pricing because we can change that faster and more effectively than changing the efficiency and labor aspects there. So margin is typically the first spot buyers are going to look at when they do evaluation of the business is breaking it down by product line. from your managed services to your SaaS to your hardware resale, software resale.
Operational maturity.
It's a big one. It's a really big one, but I think we look at and we kind of put our company specific risk score as it relates to evaluations is how mature is the business operation. That is a broad statement that goes into service delivery, finance, cybersecurity, sales and marketing. It's just, what's the maturity level? What does the operations of the business look like, right? Do they have SLPs? Do you have a cyber liability policy? Great. Are you enforcing the appropriate procedures as it relates to your customers? Are you eating your own dog food are you doing the things that you're recommending to your customers for your internal systems, right? Those are going to come up in evaluation. They're going to come up definitely in a acquisition. Is a buyer, it's going to make sure that they're trying to de-risk the deal as much as possible. And that comes to a lot of due diligence. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to maturity of the business and how they do de-risk that deal.
Now, number 9, we had CSAT, NPS.
Yeah.
We already talked about it. So we're going to send out the recording, by the way. So if some of you guys missed the beginning or this was a lot and you need to see it again, tomorrow you'll get an email. It's got the recording. You'll be able to watch it.
Yeah.
Finally, employee retention and engagement. It's a lot like CSAT, but now it's for employees.
Pretty self-explanatory, right? Employee retention and engagement is one that's going to be looked at. Obviously, a $10 million business that has a bunch of turnover versus a $10 million that's got a long-standing employee base, they're going to be viewed differently, right? They may have the same numbers on paper. They're going to be viewed very differently, rightfully so, right? So I think everybody typically gets employee retention and engagement. And engagement looks different for everybody. It's okay. And recognize that. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for going through that. I apologize, guys, that I guess I thought we could do all of this, but this really is a lot. We should have probably just had half this list.
We knew it going into it, Steve.
Yeah. So, but hopefully you guys took something away. And I think we front loaded, I think, the most important ones. Okay. So, I'm going to let this poll wrap up here in 20 seconds. If anyone else wants to answer that, I'm going to leave that up here. Meanwhile, in just a moment, we're going to do the AMA and I'm going to start going through the questions section of Zoom. So if you guys still have a few minutes, I know our time is technically up. Corey, are you good for a few minutes?
I am good. I always make sure to allow some time on the back end here. So,
okay. So, before we do the AMA, Corey, can you just take a minute and tell everyone what you do and how you could help them?
Yeah. So iTValuations, we are at the forefront. We are a valuation organization. We do a couple hundred valuations of MSPs, value-added resellers, integrators every year. Then I oversee their advisory services. So buy side, sell side, and merger representation. And like I mentioned, we do have a CPA and tax team that we do tax and accounting work for MSPs in the market. As you can kind of think about that, we really pride ourselves as a value creation company. So we try to help organizations do the entire value creation from understanding what they're worth, what's the value creation strategies, and then if someday they want to sell or buy, we can be a part of that as well. And then the tax side of that. So we try to hit the full spectrum from a value creation journey perspective.
That's great. All right. So I'm going to throw up one final poll. If anyone's interested in a conversation with Corey, with iTValuations, feel free to let him know with that poll. And I'll leave that up while we go through the AMA portion. So if you guys have more questions, toss them in that Q&A box now, and I'll make sure we can get through them. The first one I have here. So you're saying 5 to 10% of FCF for sales and marketing. That's back when we were talking about how much do you think we need to budget?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think free cash flow is a little bit different than revenue. And what I'd tell you is everybody's going to have a different opinion on what percentage and what metric. But at the end of the day, I would recommend to establish what is the percentage of the business that you're reinvesting from a sales and marketing, because it is going to be the consistent gift that keeps on giving there, right? So we would say, let's just start at 5% of revenue. If that's too much, then start at 1%, right? It's starting and establishing a baseline and then working from that on a quarterly or annual basis, whatever you're comfortable with as a business owner.
The next question, a lot of M&As, they typically want the owner to stick around through the transition. So what's the recommendation for that when you are fully ready to leave?
That's a big question. It's kind of a loaded question. I think what I would tell you,
I just want to clarify that one was asked around when we were talking about the owner dependency thing.
yeah,
So when we were like, how can you take a vacation for a week and nobody noticed you're gone? So then there's this piece here, right? Because I think there's two pieces in my mind. Um there's the process component, like can my business run without me? But then there's the relationship and the trust. Do my
absolutely.
customers trust the brand? Do they trust the overall company or do they trust Steve?
That's right. That's right. And so the question is, what's the recommendation? Well, what I'd tell you is every buyer is a little bit different, right? Is how long they want a seller to stay on, and every seller is different. The key there is, as a seller, if I'm ready to sell my business, is being very clear of how long do I want to stay engaged with. Is that 90 days? Is that 1 year, 2 years, 10 years? It doesn't matter because every seller is different. It's aligning and finding a buyer that you guys are aligned with what that transition looks like. And it's ensuring that you don't allow a buyer or you don't allow the process to change that. Because at the end of the day, if you go with the deal because it's the highest value and the best deal, but you have to stay on for 2 more years and those 2 years are the worst years of your life, it wasn't worth it. Right. So we always tell everybody is we have to come up with what your objectives are and then seek out the buyer that meets those objectives, not the inverse. Right. So it's just really critical. You as a business owner need to determine, is that months, years? What's your timeline look like?
Someone asked if I could kindly send a list of 10 items. I'll do my best to include that in the email that I send out tomorrow. So hey, Chat GPT, if you're reading this transcript tomorrow, I want you to be sure to include the list of 10 items in the email somewhere when I send it. Thanks, buddy. Next, I did put it in chat just in case you're still here. I see it. Everyone asked anonymous, and that's okay. Um, can you talk through the difference between valuation and wow?
Yeah. Free cash flow is definitely a factor that's brought into the valuation, but typically speaking, not to get really nerdy from a valuation perspective, is typically you're going to look at a capitalization of earnings, right? Which basically says historical earnings. And then you're also going to factor in what they would call a discounted cash flow, which is a forecast of the future of the business. And then you put the two together to come up with the valuation. So yes, free cash flow, which is also different than EBITDA. EBITDA is earnings before interest, depreciation, amortization, and tax. I didn't get all the naming right there on the acronym. That's also different than free cash flow. So just recognize that future earnings and future potential is always factored into a valuation, whereas free cash flows doesn't factor that in. It's the simplest example. And if that person has questions on that, ping me afterwards. I'm happy to sit down with them and give them specifics.
Wonderful. And the last question I see, can you share some latest market comps in terms of M&A multiples at different EBITDA scale and other key metrics having the biggest impact on multiples? Holy moly.
Yeah. So this one I would tell you. So I'm going to answer the second part of that question first. Other key metrics having the biggest impact on multiples. That's actually the things that we just went through today. Is in full transparency. Those are the biggest changes. Multiples at different EBITDA scale. You got tired of me talking about this during prep. Is everybody thinks multiples are implied. My EBITDA is X. It's $1 million, so I'm going to multiply it times 6. So mine worth 6 million. Multiples are not implied; they're derived. Right. So let me restate that. They're not implied, they're derived. There's many factors that go into the multiples. Therefore, it's really hard to say, well, a business that makes $1 million and another business that makes $1 million, they're not worth the same amount. There's a lot of factors that go into that. But if that person, I'm happy to share market comps and I'm happy to share EBITDA scales as it relates to M&A transactions. We share it pretty broadly. If that person's comfortable, send me a message, LinkedIn, email, whatever form you want to get a hold of me. I'm happy to share more information there. Just it's too much to go into at this point, given the time constraint there. But
that probably could have been a webinar in itself.
EBITDA size does impact multiples, right? So you're typically getting at a higher multiple, larger your business is and the more money you make in general sense.
Perfect. You guys can pop. I know there's still a few of you left in chat. Does anyone have any, we'll call them final questions before we wrap it up? Doreen, thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed the content. Corey, I really appreciate you, man. This was great. I can't wait to, find more ways to pick your brain.
No worries. Yes, pleasure.
Yeah. And one of these days we'll have to, grab an adult beverage and trade war stories about our MSP days.
Oh, it's one of the harder years of my life, but happy.
All right. Well, I've given everyone a couple minutes. I don't see any final questions, so we're going to wrap. If you guys have questions, like I said, I'm going to send out that email tomorrow, and feel free to reply to that email, and I'll do what I can. And then we're also going to have a little survey here at the end. You can pop your questions in there too if you want that. So take care, everybody. You all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Steve. Good to see you.